So you have to ask yourself why. And I think one of the answers is, and this is something you want to think about as business leaders, is I don't think you can build a good enough mousetrap. I don't think you can seal the system hermetically so that no clever human being will ever be able to gain it. I think that's probably also the truth with hacking. I think given enough time, most things can be hacked at some stage or another by most people. That's a hypothesis. So we need to think about then, if we can't create a good enough system to guarantee that we're not defrauded as business leaders of what we have to do? The answer, I think, is creating an ethical culture. And what does that mean? It means that the norms of behavior in the organization culture can be called the unwritten rules of the game. And it's extremely powerful. So the question is, it's a very glib thing to say for a management consultant, oh, we need to create an ethical culture, that's all you need to do. Is how do you begin to do that? And I want to tell a story, two stories from my experience working for two oil companies. One's British Petroleum and one is Shell. I think they're kind of funny. They were one of these experiences where I was running a workshop for British Petroleum and there were about 20 guys in the room, men and women. I'm using that in a gender-neutral way. They're sitting around the room and they did the usual introductions about where the bathrooms were and where the exits were if there was a fire and all of that. And then they said, who wants to share a safety story? So I was the workshop leader. So first of all, I didn't expect this coming. And then secondly, I thought, what the heck is a safety story? Really? What is that? And then a couple of people spoke and they told stories about how they'd intervened at British Petroleum in order to prevent an injury or a loss of life or potential injury or loss of life. And so what they were doing then, and it was a little weird for me at the time, is they were trying to create a safety culture at British Petroleum. And how are they trying to do that? Culture lives in the stories we tell. The honesty of Abraham Lincoln, the story about the guy walking however long it was to return the couple of bucks, right? We've all heard that story. I don't know how it was a trivial amount of money, right? These kinds of stories tell you a lot about the person, and they tell you a lot about the organization. And the stories about an organization, the heroic stories, tell you a lot about the culture. And so, at British Petroleum, they had safety stories at every meeting that was longer than half a day long. It only takes about 6 or 7 minutes. So there's two things about that. One thing about that is I think it's a great idea, but the second thing is nobody seems to try and do it for things like innovation. And it's one of the things I've been working and talking to Microsoft a lot lately about them. They're trying to transmit a culture of innovation. They're trying to become more innovative. They're already pretty innovative. They'd like to be more innovative. So one of the things they're trying to do is tell innovation stories. Is what are the heroic Abraham Lincoln type stories that exist around Microsoft? What are the bright spots? Who are our innovation heroes? And how can we learn from the best things that we're doing? Some people call this appreciative inquiry. It's what are the things that we're amazing at? And how can we do more than those? So one way of looking at business improvement is what are the things we're terrible at and how can we stop doing those? And this is in a sense the opposite. It's what are we awesome at and how can we do more of that? And sharing stories is one of the ways of transmitting that. I was also at Shell, as another oil company, and I went to visit a friend of mine who was head of health and safety for Shell. And I had one of these, had a horrible experience. It's one of these things that starts off as a horrible experience, and then it's something which I still think about even though it's a dozen years later. So here's what happened. So I go to visit this guy. Shell's head office is overlooking the Thames River. It's a miserable London day. It's raining, it's cold, it's gray. So we decide not to go to Starbucks for the coffee that we're about to have. We're going to go downstairs to the Shell cafeteria, which is in the basement. And so down we go, and as we're on the escalator going down at Shell to have our cup of coffee, I've got my briefcase in one hand, and I'm gesticulating Tony Soprano style with the other hand while I'm talking to this guy. And he said, "Can I stop you there, Paul?" Well, okay, sure. So he says, at Shell, we always hold the handrail. So I had one of these experiences like, what? Like, why are you bothering me, who's an adult, nearly 50 years old, for holding the handrail? What am I, in kindergarten here? You know, really kind of like an annoying kind of shock to the system. And at the time, I didn't say anything about it. I said, okay, he's having a bad day. He wants to micromanage the heck out of me. I don't really care. I put my hand on the handrail, and I shut up for a bit longer. I got to the coffee shop, and I got a cup of coffee, and I filled it to the brim, and I'm walking over to the table where he and I are about to start our business conversation. And he said, "Can I stop you there, Paul?" oh my God, what does he want now? He said, we always cover liquids at Shell when we walk around. All right, so I trudged over sullenly back to the condiment stand and found a plastic cup for my top for my coffee cup. Went back to sit down with these guys. I didn't say anything more about it or think to the guy at the time. I was so pissed I didn't actually know how to bring it up. And so we had a cup of coffee, and then I wrote this book, and one of the things I put in this book is how do you change culture in organizations? Yeah? And one of the ways I've said is through stories. And so one of the things I said is, well, he's trying to change the culture, right? He's trying to create a safety culture at Shell. So I wrote them the text, sent him the text of the book. He wrote back to me and says, you still don't get it, do you? My buddy. All right, buddy, what do I not get now? He said, the thing that you don't get is what we're trying to do is, one, we're trying to instill a safety culture. But the other thing we're trying to do is get people to speak up. Because sure as eggs are eggs, if you can't speak up in a low value situation, like a low stakes situation like that, can you really speak up on a rig where real lives might be at stake? And so they're trying to get to is a culture where people are unafraid, in a sense, to get up in each other's face and say, are we doing the right thing here? And I think it's an amazing thing. And it's one of the most annoying experiences that morning. Was a horrible morning. What was the guy doing? And so I think it's a remarkable thing. And there are good reasons for it, because if you're on a rig and you don't hold the handrail and you fall, it could be, your backside. It could be the end of game, right? Hot liquids aren't always, the toxic coffee from the cafeteria. They can be toxic chemicals, or they can create spills that people slip on. So, there are real material dangers. But the main thing he said is we're trying to create an ethical culture at Shell. And to have an ethical culture, people need to speak up.